Emma Bee was excited to grow up. The day had finally come that she was big and strong and fast enough to help collect pollen and nectar. "Be sure to hug the flowers to thank them for their gift of food," said her mother. "I will, Queenie Mama," said Emma. "And stay out of Mrs. Muggin's yard. You can tell where Mrs. Muggin lives because the flowers are straight and tall and all look the same," warned her mother. Emma agreed and happily buzzed away.
Hello and welcome to Drawn to Write. I'm your host, Felicia Schneider-Hahn. Our program explores the work of writers and illustrators and the junction where words and images meet. Today, we have Pamela Fish Carlson and Tessa Carlson talking about their first book, Emma Bee. Pamela Fish Carlson is a longtime television broadcaster. Pam has a passion for the natural environment, producing and hosting a program called Great Gardening. Tessa Carlson is an artist inspired by the beauty of the natural world and the imagination. Welcome, Pam and Tessa, to the program today. I'm so excited you're going to talk about your book, Emma Bee, because also, besides being a writer and an illustrator, you are also mother and daughter, which is so cool to have you talking about that relationship and how it influenced this book. So to start, can you just tell us about the book itself?
The book came from an idea that was spawned by the Great Gardening program, which I have done for about 10 years now at the local PBS station. We did a whole show on pollinators and bees.
Look at that, beautiful, frame after frame. That's a sign that the queen is alive and doing good.
I just thought it was really fascinating, it was very informative, and it was really an important topic. And so my mind went to, how do I take that topic that people need to know more about and maybe make it more accessible? And as a parent and as a longtime supporter of early childhood education, I immediately went to, well, let's make it something, let's make it a topic that we can talk to kids about and find a way to do that.
Okay, now we're starting to get into what's called the brood nest, where the queen has laid eggs and babies are being raised. Okay.
And then how did you decide to work together on this project?
Well, I decided.
That was more your decision, yes.
Well, let's back up and talk about the publisher, who is your friend.
Oh, one of my dear friends from college came to visit us for a 4th of July out at the lake, and my mom started talking about the idea she had for a book, and my friend Hannah suggested, well, why don't you illustrate it? And we kind of just started talking about it, and she has helped publish a lot of children's books through Beavers Pond Press, so that was kind of how the idea started to come to fruition.
Soon Emma came to a beautiful garden filled with plants and flowers in all different colors and sizes. A little girl lived there, and she was talking to a flower. "I'm Lizzie, and I am 5 years old." Emma landed on that same flower. "I'm Emma, and this is my first day out of the hive."
Can you talk a little bit about your pieces here that you have?
Yeah.
Because it's so cool, they have the moss on them.
The moss was something I was doing before we started doing the book, actually. I've always been interested in mixed media and taking found objects and things from nature, like pebbles or moss or sticks or what have you, and gluing them to the canvas and then trying to paint and work around it and create a scene using paint, but also using the natural world. So we had to photograph them. We couldn't scan the paintings because of the moss that was attached to them. So it was kind of a different process of doing everything on canvas and then photographing it and making sure the photos looked right and getting the texture of the moss to really read well in the photos in the book was a little bit of a process, which was fun and different, yeah.
Yeah, I think that Tessa has always loved nature and flowers, and it showed up a lot in her work prior to this book. And so I knew she could do it, but I was kind of blown away by how she really brought the story to life, and I just love the vibrancy of the color that you used.
Tessa, did you have any mentors growing up, artistic mentors?
My high school art teacher, John Harder, was a big influence on me. We didn't have a huge art program at the school. He was the only teacher, but he knew a lot about everything and about all the different mediums, ceramics, jewelry making, printmaking. He kind of taught everything, and he was just really encouraging, and the first person who kind of said to me, like, you could do this for a career if you wanted to, and that was news to my ears. So it made me feel more confident in the fact that I could do something with art if I wanted to. Because it was always something that I loved to do, but didn't have enough confidence to actually put it out there.
Emma did not want to leave the garden, but she was excited to tell Queenie Mama about her day and proud to share her nectar and pollen with the hive. Her favorite thing happened at the hive. That's where Emma's nectar would become smooth and sticky, golden, yummy honey.
So Pam, with the story itself, you wrote the whole thing and then took it.
Handed it to Tessa, yeah. Well, handed it to the project manager who, played with it a little bit. And but I don't think you were really involved in the writing of the story at all. Is that correct? If I remember it right? Yeah. So, and I think that's typically how people do that. But she was an influence for the story in that part of it is about how children are afraid of bees and getting stung by a bee. And when Tessa was very little, with her interest in nature, at one point we were playing outside. I think you were maybe 2 or 3. She was a toddler. And she went to pick up a bumblebee because she thought it was just so interesting and she wanted, to see it closer or maybe make it her pet or something. And of course it stung her. Well, then for years, I think, you wouldn't go near bees. And not that she was afraid of them, she was mad at it. She was like, I am not going to play with you if you are going to sting me. And so again, that was part of what we tried to incorporate into the story.
The next day, Emma made a beeline back to the beautiful garden. When she got there, Emma saw several children playing among the flowers. Lizzie was having a birthday party. Suddenly, one of the children yelled, "Bee, bee, watch out, it's going to sting you." Emma didn't understand. Bees use their stingers only when they're in danger, and she was having fun at Lizzie's party. Why would she sting them? Zipping and zinging, she tried to make the children like her by showing off some of her best flying tricks. But that just made the children scream and run and flap their arms. Emma worried they might swat her.
Were there any points in the process of working on this together that you thought, this isn't a good idea anymore?
I mean, it was a process. I think it was maybe harder for us than some other author-illustrator partnerships just because there were so many emotions involved. And sometimes we didn't always see eye to eye on things, and it wasn't like a super professional relationship because she's the mom and I'm the daughter. So sometimes I had to listen to what she wanted me to do instead of just doing my own thing. So there were some compromises we both had to make, I think.
Yeah, initially when we came up with the character, I think Tessa was drawing from what she had seen scientifically in some more real pictures of bees.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Emma bee character, we messed around with I painted a few different bees first until we really decided which one we wanted. So I think that was something that we kind of came up with together.
I think it did surprise me when Tessa first brought the first image of the bee, because I'm like, this is not what I thought. And I kind of felt like, I really thought we were maybe a little bit more in sync here. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because, I was coming from one place and she was coming from her own, and we weren't really communicating a lot then. I think having known that well, the process in doing a children's book, and this is our first one, is, you hand the story to the illustrator and they make it look like their vision. But as mom, I wanted it to look like my vision.
Yeah.
This is, I think with an artist and a painter, you're putting yourself right out on that canvas so much. And so I think it's hard to hear, oh, that really isn't what I had in mind, or I think you maybe heard, oh, I don't like it, and what I was trying to say was, let's make it different.
Yeah, I'm curious how your relationship changed and grew as a result of...
I think we got better at communicating things, and I maybe got a little less defensive or sensitive about criticism about my own artwork.
Be sure to leave the bees alone as they spread pollen to the flowers, said Lizzie's mother. I will, Mama, said Lizzie. And don't be afraid of the bees. It's bees that help make our flowers lovely and strong in all different colors and sizes.
Can you talk, Tessa, a little bit about growing up in Minnesota and your time in the natural world, in the forest?
Yeah. So growing up in Hermantown, my parents had quite a few acres of land that was just forest. There were 3 ponds on the property, a creek that ran back through it, and my grandparents lived at the end of our driveway, and they had big vegetable gardens. So I was surrounded by gardening and nature and the outdoors pretty much my entire life. And then after college, when I really got into painting, it just kind of started showing up more in my work, because I think of how much influence all that had on me and how it shaped who I am as a person.
So, as a parent, I hear this a lot about how important it is getting my kids outside and exposed to nature. So from your point of view, having come through a childhood like that, why is that important to you as an adult?
I think it's important just to realize how important the little things are, just spending time unplugged and just spending time in nature. But also I spend a lot of time doing walking meditations, where you walk and you just kind of focus on the sounds and the sights and the things that are around you instead of the thoughts that are in your head. And I think that helps me a lot connect with the outside world and keep an eye out for small details that other people don't notice. I think that was something that I didn't realize I had learned it until I got older, and I moved to the cities because I wanted to get away from the wilderness and be in a more urban environment. And then I realized how much my upbringing had really shaped the way I viewed the world.
Emma slurped the sweet, juicy nectar. She nibbled a nubbin of fluffy yellow pollen. She snuggled and hugged the flower to thank it for the nectar and pollen, just like Queenie Mama had taught her to do. While Lizzie sang and laughed, Emma zipped and zinged and buzzed.
And how did you choose the language to tell that story to kids?
Well, a lot of that I really do attribute to the project manager and the education that I got through them. You want to use words like zip and zing, and we want repetition, and we want rhythm, and we want it to sound good when it's read out loud. And then that also helps children when they learn to read, because, the assonance is something that they hear, and the alliteration, and then that helps them with their reading as well.
Oh, helps them to become better readers.
Right.
Oh, nice.
But also I really struggled with making it right, but not making it too technical. So it had to be something that that was telling children about honeybees, the risks to them, and how they go out in the world and what they do, which can be really technical.
Yeah, I think the general estimate is 1 out of every 3 or 2 out of every 5 bites of food is dependent upon pollination. It's an amazing interaction with our food systems and how much we're reliant on them and how much trouble is sort of on the horizon with some of the issues that are going on with bees right now.
And I remember talking to the editor and project manager about that, about, I don't want to get it wrong because I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about here. And they said, yeah, but remember, this is a character, and these are characters, and this is a story, and it's for children. So, so there was kind of a fine line.
Now you know about Mrs. Muggin's yard, said Queenie Mama. She sprays a stinky, foggy potion on her flowers to make them look just right, and that potion makes bees sick.
I'm wondering, so a family reads your book and they say, you know what, this is right. We need to be conscious of our little backyard and what we plant here. Where do they start? What would you recommend that they?
Well, we did put some ideas for things to plant. So we put a few resources at the back, and we picked out just 8 of our favorites. And they are also happen to be flowers that if people plant, they will attract pollinators. And so, again, that's part of the education of getting people to understand, it's not just about putting something in the ground that you think is cool or you want, to look a certain way, but it's about, helping the larger environment.
Tessa, do you have a garden now?
I do, yeah.
How does gardening influence your art, the process of growing things in a garden and deciding what goes there and helping it along? How does that connect with being an artist?
I think there's a similar process because it's kind of an experiment. You don't know if things are going to grow or what you're going to get out of it, and it's very hands-on, which I like working with my hands, and I like creating things. And with a garden, you're creating things with the earth, and then with painting, you're creating things on canvas.
Now that it's out there in the world, is there anything that has surprised you about how it's been received or how the story takes on a life of its own?
I think surprising how kids are responding to the illustrations and how interested they are in the different textures and how well that showed up in the photographs.
There's really a richness and a depth that I know my kids responded to when we were reading it, that almost like you could touch them. So it wasn't surprising to see the moss on the originals, that does come across in some really interesting ways.
Yeah, it did turn out very interesting.
And I don't think we talked about that ahead of time either. But the detail that you put into them, was part of that. And then to work with the mixed media, I don't know that people who illustrate children's books would normally do that, but that's the way she does her art. So she did it, and then to have it photographed and just, come to life so nicely in the book was really rewarding.
Do you have another project you want to work on together?
Not that I can think of right now.
The next thing.
Well, I don't think that illustration was, something that you were even really considering at the time, correct?
No, not really.
Oh.
Just because I didn't really feel like my work lended itself to illustration because it stuck off of the canvas so much, and usually illustrations or drawings or paintings or things that can be scanned pretty easily. Yeah, and I don't know if I would do the illustrations the same way if I did another book, because it was definitely a long process to do each one on canvas and the moss and everything.
As Lizzie danced and twirled through the garden, Emma danced and whirled from flower to flower and gave each flower a snuggle and a hug. Lizzie sang and laughed, and Emma zipped and zinged and buzzed until it was time to go home. Lizzie was so thankful for all the plants and flowers, and Emma was so happy to be a honeybee.
Did you see her artistic ability when she was very young?
Very young, yeah. I saw it, when you were a baby, you were painting and loved coloring, making messes. In fact, one of my favorite stories is we when you're home with kids, you know, it can be a long day. So we took a few days and decided we were going to collect rocks and then paint them. So we would go out, find rocks, bring them in, you know, and so we were all set up, started the rock painting project, and I had to go to the restroom, which I did, and I wasn't gone very long. But by the time I got out, Tessa had decided to paint the bottom of her feet and run around the house. So
It was my first performance art piece, installation piece.
Do you remember this happening?
No.
she was only like 2 or 3, I think, yeah. So, but very creative even back then.
Well, thank you both for coming in today and talking about your book, Emma B. And I can't wait to see what you collaborate on next. And thank you for joining us for Drawn to Write, where we talk with writers and illustrators at that juncture of words and images. I've been your host, Felicia Schneider-Hahn.